All right, I got 10 minutes before I have to pick up the kids at school. I think it was Mark Twain that said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly does rhyme. It's Halloween season, and every Halloween, it's always a variation of the same thing that happens. People get outraged by people's costumes, and today's victim is Olympian Shaun White, who dressed up as Simple Jack from Tropic Thunder from Down Under. Tropic Thunder? Tropic Thunder, whatever, that movie, Tropic Thunder. And for those of you who don't know what that movie is, Simple Jack was a character that Ben Stiller's character was playing in the movie, who was mentally challenged, and Ben Stiller was playing the role of Simple Jack in the movie, which is sort of like a movie within the movie, for the purposes of getting an Oscar. Now, Tropic Thunder from... Oh, now I'm saying Tropic Thunder from Down Under. That was a dessert that they used to sell at the Outback. Chocolate Thunder from Down Under. It was like a chocolate thing. Tropic Thunder, at the time the movie came out, basically got universally blasted for a number of reasons. One of which was it being disrespectful to mentally challenged individuals in the way that they talked about them, treated them, and portrayed them in the movie. The movie now infamously coined the term never go full R word, and you can Google it if you don't know what it is.
You're serious? You don't know? Everybody knows you never go full read. You went full read. Never go full read.
Because the idea being that in the movie, Hollywood has a thing where you'll get an Oscar if you play someone who is mildly mentally challenged but not overly mentally challenged. And they gave examples like Forrest Gump versus Sean Penn's character in the movie I Am Sam.
You don't buy that? That's Sean Penn, 2001, I Am Sam. Went full read, went home empty-handed.
And it got blasted for Robert Downey Jr. portraying a black person in the movie, and as a result having to wear a costume which made him black. So Shaun White is getting flack now for having dressed up as Simple Jack. You can't say wrongly so, rightfully so. He's an Olympian, he's associated with the Olympics, he's associated with the Special Olympics, and they gave him a lot of flack for having done it. He apologized, and his apology, from what I read, was genuine, sincere, and believable. You know, it highlights a bit of the risk of the Halloween season, is that every Halloween season people do wear costumes that push the limits of what is respectful, but every year people go potentially overboard on the, what Joe Rogan calls recreational outrage for Halloween costumes. The thing is this, there are costumes that are objectively offensive and that people should know better than to wear. Dressing up as a mentally challenged individual from a movie is obviously one of them. Then there are other ones which are not objectively over the line, where people's sensitivities are maybe a little bit too sensitive, and we get into a situation where there is a line that we don't know where it is, and we have to walk around on eggshells in terms of dressing our kids in costumes. One prime example was a little girl who dressed up like her soccer hero Mo Salah, and she being a young white girl, when dressing up like a man with darker skin and facial hair, obviously dressed up with certain attributes that would allow her to look like her sports hero that she wanted to look like for the purposes of Halloween. She got flack for darkening her skin tone to look like Mo Salah. For anyone who saw the costume, the attention to detail was impeccable. But the more fundamental problem that it illustrates is, where does something go from being objectively offensive to being subjectively offensive based on the hypersensitivities of some people versus the ordinary regular sensitivities of other people? I don't know where the line is. I understand the concerns on both sides, and I understand the sensitivities on both sides, and I will, as a matter of personal preference, always err on the side of caution as opposed to erring on the side of insulting or hurting someone, just because I don't like hurting people, even if I think that they are not necessarily correct in feeling hurt. But there is a line, and we do go from objectively offensive and inappropriate costumes to very subjectively inappropriate and offensive costumes, where I think the greater risk is of adults imposing their baggage on kids who simply don't have that baggage with them. And at some point, we have to take a step back from our own personal sensitivities and ask ourselves, is this objectively offensive? Is this subjectively offensive? Is this not even offensive and this is actually just something about me and not about the person? How do you distinguish it? I don't know how you distinguish it. The line I've been using, at least for my own life, is looking at the reasonable intent or the actual intent of the person who dressed up the way they dressed up. Were they doing it to make fun of the subject, or were they doing it out of admiration for the subject? You know, and that's why I look at Shaun White, who I don't think was doing it to make fun of the subject, because he was effectively dressing up as a movie character, dressing up as a movie character. So it may have been insensitive and it may have been a wrong decision, and he apologized for it, and we're going to get to the apology and the idea of accepting apologies, but I don't believe his underlying intent was to make fun of anyone or at the expense of anyone, but that may have been the actual result of what he did. Take the little girl dressing up like Mo Salah. Not only do I think that she's not making fun of anybody and trying to get laughs at anybody's expense, on the absolute contrary, I think she is showing signs of admiration for a sports hero of hers, and she should not be made to feel bad about having done that. It is exquisitely difficult for a young white girl to dress up like her hero Mo Salah without trying to replicate certain of his most obvious physical features. And you have to ask yourself, is the kid doing this to make fun of those features, or is this kid doing this so that they can look like someone they admire and look up to? And if the answer is one way or the other, that should change how you view this specific situation. The risk is that you end up living in a world where people are just paralyzed by the fear of hurting other people or being at the receiving end of the backlash of people who are overly sensitive in that which shocks and offends them. Which brings us now back to the apologies. The biggest risk of the geopolitical landscape that we live in is that people are reluctant to issue apologies because people do not necessarily receive apologies for the purposes of accepting them. People receive apologies for the purposes of using it against the person who apologized. Therefore, the person is reluctant to apologize because their fear is that it is going to be used against them as opposed to accepted. And there are politics to apologies. Apologies will be accepted when you don't want to use it against the person who issued the apology, and they will be used like a sort of Damocles over the heads of people who you don't necessarily want to actually forgive. You just want to use the apology as something against them in the future for whatever the purpose is. You don't have to forget about what the person did, but you have to forgive for what they did. And if they do it again, well, then you can reassess whether or not you forgive them based on a subsequent apology. But we cannot use apologies like currency or as chips in a poker match. Apologetic blackmail. We have to accept apologies without apologetic blackmail. But I think we need to loosen up a little bit, give the benefit of the doubt, and above all, let kids be kids, and especially at Halloween. Happy Halloween. Peace out, like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and stay tuned because we're going to have an awesome, awesome Halloween episode coming tomorrow. Peace.